But in the past 50 years, we have been forgetting the lesson that the wise men knew so well. From regarding government as a threat to our freedom, we have come more and more to regard government as a benefactor from which all good things flow. We have assigned increasing tasks of great importance to government. We have turned over to government a larger and larger fraction of our income to be spent on our behalf. And the results are plain for all to see. They are disappointing. The great expectations have not been achieved, and our freedoms have suffered in the process. Where did it all go wrong? Government began to take an increasing part in our personal affairs nearly 50 years ago. It was 1933, at the lowest point of the worst depression in history. The idea took root that capitalism had failed, and that failure was responsible for the human and economic tragedy. In the early 30s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his advisors met here to devise programs to meet the problems of the Depression. Their answer was to give central government more power. Out of that beginning came today's welfare state. This Empire State Plaza in Albany, New York is a fine example of the difference between public political power and private economic power. It was constructed while Nelson Rockefeller was governor of the state of New York. The Rockefeller family has spent millions of its private money on good causes. It has endowed universities like my own at the University of Chicago, financed medical research, reconstructed Williamsburg. Yet not all the private money of the Rockefeller family gave them anything like the amount of power that Nelson Rockefeller was able to have as governor of the state of New York. He constructed monuments like this all over the state, using every expedient he could think of to finance them. When he left office, taxes per person in New York State were higher than in any other state in the country, excepting only Alaska. And there was a monumental debt besides. So much so that his successor, who had the reputation as a Democratic congressman of being a big spender, had to use his inaugural speech to preach the virtues of austerity and to say, the time of wine and roses is over. Look at this skyline. It's Chicago, and I think it's very beautiful. Much of it is less than 20 years old. Those tall buildings were built by private enterprise for use by private enterprise, not by government for use by government bureaucrats. These are productive monuments, not a burden on the taxpayer, a burden that has almost bankrupted New York City. The irony is that for the most part it was good intentions that led us to where we are today, a nation governed by bureaucratic empires. I wonder whether, when they built this building, they realized that it was going to come out looking like a fortress. From modest beginnings in 1953, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare has grown into a veritable empire. Only a small part of its total staff is housed in this headquarters building, a mere 2,000 bureaucrats. Its budget is the third largest budget in the whole world, exceeded only by the entire budget of the United States and of the Soviet Union. It employs directly 150,000 full-time people, and the empire it rules employs another million. More than 1 out of every 100 people in the United States works in the HEW empire. As we have seen in this series, the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare is spending increasing amounts of our money each year on health. One effect is simply to raise the fees and prices for medical and hospital services without a corresponding improvement in the quality of medical care that we receive. It is controlling more and more of the food and drugs we buy. In the process, discouraging the development and preventing the marketing of new drugs that could be saving tens of thousands of lives a year. In the field of education, the sums being spent are skyrocketing, yet by common consent, the quality of education is declining. More and more money is being spent and increasingly rigid controls imposed to promote racial integration, yet our society is becoming more fragmented. In the field of welfare, billions of dollars are being spent each year, yet at a time when the standard of life of the average American is higher than it has ever been in history, the number of people on welfare rolls is growing. Social Security, the budget is colossal, yet it is in deep financial trouble. The young complain, and with considerable justice, about the high taxes that they must pay, and those taxes are needed to finance the benefits that are going to the old. Yet the old complain, and also with justice, that it is difficult for them to maintain the standard of life that they were led to expect. A system that was enacted to make sure that the old never became objects of charity sees an increasing number of our older folk on the welfare rolls. By its own accounting, HEW in 1 year lost through fraud, abuse, and waste an amount of money that would have built well over 100,000 houses costing $50,000 apiece. Little wonder that those initials are increasingly coming to stand for how to encourage waste.
They've found in some cities that upwards of 20 to 25% of all the people currently receiving welfare are either totally ineligible for welfare or are receiving more than they should be receiving. And it appears in looking into this that the main reason for this is not the welfare laws themselves, but the way they're administered. They're administered in a very lax and loose manner. One of the most famous cases was, frankly, it just happened last week. They arrested a woman in Southern California where they referred to her as the welfare queen. And over the past 6 or 7 years, she had received $300,000 in welfare payments, which, of course, is on an after-tax basis. So if you put it on a before-tax basis, it might be equivalent to over $1 million in before-tax income. And she and her husband were living in a nice $170,000 home and nice cars. And she used a very simple technique. She just used aliases, used false names, and signed up, and I forget, countless different welfare agencies and departments, and drove around and collected her checks.
Something had to be done about this scandalous state of affairs. What better bureaucratic decision than to set up a special department crammed with computers and civil servants, all dedicated to tracking down waste, using taxpayers' money, of course, in the process. $27.5 million in the first year. As Adam Smith wrote over 200 years ago, in the economic market, people who intend to serve only their own private interests are led by an invisible hand to serve public interests that it was no part of their intention to promote. In the political market, there's an invisible hand operating as well, but unfortunately, it operates in the opposite direction. People who intend only to serve the public interest are led by an invisible hand to serve private interests that it was no part of their intention to promote. The reason is simple. As we have seen in case after case, the general interest is diffused among millions and millions of people. The special interest is concentrated. When reformers get a measure through, they go on to their next crusade, leaving no one behind to protect the public interest. But they do leave behind some money and some power. And the special interests that can benefit from that money and from that power are quick to gain it at the expense of most of the rest of us. By now, after 50 years of experience, it is clear that it doesn't really matter who lives in that house. Government will continue to grow so long as the rest of us believe that the way to solve our problems is to turn them over to government.